Ivester, right? Is that
Yes,
right?
Ivester.
Well, awesome. Welcome to God-Sized Stories, Lanier.
Thank you.
I'm very excited about talking to you about this gorgeous, gorgeous book I'm
Oh,
holding in my hand right here. It's called Glad and Golden Hours, and the subtitle is A Companion for Advent and Christmas Time. I confess, when I got your book, I was like, okay, I have to review many books. And I was like, okay, one more Advent book, right? At this time of the year, you always receive those type of books. But I have to tell you that I was so surprised with just first of all, you have an incredible literary voice.
thank
You need
you.
to write more. Just your voice, you're very captivating in how you write. You're poetic, and I can see why, because
Well, thank you,
you
Patricia.
do love poetry, and you're an artist, really. So, and it shows. It's a beautiful, beautiful work of art. But for those who don't know you and don't know about this book, tell us a little bit about what this glad and golden hours, what does this refer to?
Yeah. So this book has been famously difficult to describe, and it's just been fun for me to see people receive it and say, "Oh my goodness, it's it's not exactly what I thought." But the title of the book comes from a lesser known verse in a very well known Christmas carol. It came upon the midnight clear, and if it's okay, I'll read it quickly because I feel like this little verse just really encompasses the heart of this book. And I like to
Yes.
think, pretty much our human experience as well. So I'll just read this. This is oftentimes the third verse of It Came Up in the Midnight Clear. Sometimes it's not even included at all, but here it is. O ye beneath life's crushing load, whose forms are bending low, who toil along the climbing way with painful steps and slow. Look now, for glad and golden hours come swiftly on the wing. Oh, rest beside the weary road and hear the angels sing. And embedded in that verse and also the heart of my book is an invitation to just step out of the wind a little bit, to slow down, even in the midst of our preparations and celebrations of Christmas, to just receive the Lord's presence in a really special and personal way. And not in spite of the hardships of life, but right in the middle of them. So at its heart, Glad and Golden Hours is truly a story of what it can look like to bring our joys and our sorrows into the circle of the season. And as I'm sure you've already found, Patricia, it's a collection of stories and essays. It's very memoir based, but I also have included a lot of recipes and crafts and traditions and ways to just kind of embody some of the themes of the book. So,
So I have to tell you, because it's a big volume, and it has
it's
just so much. It's really a precious, precious book. I'm really enjoying it. And but this has to be like a labor of love. Is I know what it is to write a book. It is always a labor of love,
Mhm.
but like a long labor, I would assume. This has been in the works for many years, I assume.
It has. I mean, we officially I officially started writing it. My illustrator and I, it's very much a collaborative work. So I say we started it
Yes.
in January of 2021.
Okay.
But I've had a file on my computer for 15 years that I've just been piling ideas and notes into. But the last 10 years, the last decade of my life in particular, my husband and I have walked through a lot of trials. We've seen a lot of grief and loss, and that those things have truly informed the heart of the book. And so, I like to think it wasn't ready until this time.
And that is true to so many authors, isn't it, Lanier? Because it is in the midst of those trials that you find the Savior.
Yes.
You find him in a deeper way that you wouldn't have otherwise found him, you know. And I can relate to that, and it's a beautiful thing. And in this time of the year, particularly, with so many people that are grieving,
Yes.
right? And grief is something that follows us all year round, but
Mhm.
it takes a new form in the holiday season, right?
Yes,
So tell
absolutely.
me how you invite your reader to really rest in the birth of our Savior during this time. How do you, in a practical way, use this book to do that?
Well, one of the things that I really wanted to accomplish in this book is the distinction between Advent as a season and Christmastide as a season. And they are, of course, married. But
Yes.
historically, the weeks leading up to Christmas, the church has observed these 4 weeks of Advent as a time of acknowledged waiting,
Mm-hmm.
of longing, of just the we're embodying the fact that Christ has come, but Advent is giving us that place to say, hey, we're still waiting on the second coming. We're waiting for all things to be restored. We're waiting for his kingdom to come, in its
Mm-hmm.
completion. And so we're living in the midst of this partially fulfilled hope. And I love the way that Advent just invites us into that space, that it really does clear room for our longings and our griefs and our sorrows and our questions. Advent is not a season that shies away from that. And I really, the older I've gotten and the more loss and grief that I've walked through, the more precious this season has become, really. Because on the other side of Advent, of course, is Christmastide. And the beauty of these two seasons is that if Advent clears space for our grief, Christmas makes room for our joy. And our joy as Christians has nothing to do with our circumstances. It
That's
is
right.
so far above mere happiness that we can't, you know, articulate it even.
Yes.
That Christmas gives us a place to, just put a stake in the ground and say, he has come, he is with us, he is coming again, and to celebrate that fact. But I feel like the Christmas and Advent would be incomplete without the other. We really need both. And I just do love the fact that Advent just welcomes us and our griefs and our sorrows. And that
That's
has just become increasingly precious.
Yes, and I saw in the introduction of your book, and by the way, you lost your mama, who
Yes,
2 years
yes,
ago. So I know
yes.
that this is part of the grief,
It is.
because she was the one who started a lot of these traditions at
Yes,
home, right?
yes, very much.
So since this, you have been compiling this information for so many years, how
Mhm.
much of her hand is in this book?
Oh, I love that question. I love that question, Patricia. So I was halfway through this book when my mother died. I was well into the second draft, so hadn't really started the revision process. But I was obliged, of course, because of grief, and then all the responsibilities that came with settling her estate and
Yeah.
emptying and selling my childhood home. I had to set the manuscript aside. And, we went through Christmas, that first Christmas without her, and I do write about that in the book. But when I returned to the manuscript after that Christmas, I realized to my joy that my mother was already all over this book, even in places where I had not overtly mentioned her, because
Hmm.
her influence, and just all of these the, these ideals that I hold so closely, she's the one who instilled them in me. And so it really was such a precious opportunity to go back to that manuscript, see all the ways that she was rising to the surface, and realize, oh my goodness, what a wonderful way to honor her. And to, of course, to dedicate this book to her, but to process my grief through the completion of this manuscript, it was like I was keeping company with her for that
It's
for that
beautiful.
year. It was so sweet. And it was just such a, there were times that I'd be writing that I would just lay my head down on my desk and cry because I missed her
Of
so much.
course. Of
But
course.
at the same time, I thought, oh, I get to share her
Mhm.
with whoever reads this book, and her influence
Yes.
will continue. And so that was just a really beautiful full circle of grief for me.
Hmm.
And come out, I really came out rejoicing on the other side. And it makes me so happy to think that people who wouldn't have known her
Yeah.
otherwise now will have the opportunity to spend time with
Yeah.
her.
Isn't that beautiful the way that God does these things,
Yes.
because you know that she is so much of this process because she started all these traditions when you
Yes.
were little, like when you were,
Yes.
so that's how you grew up. So I just love how her life, the ripples of her life continue now in this book, and they're going to bless so many people. So your mama must have been a wonderful woman. And I have a wonderful mama, so I know I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry for your loss.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I miss her every single day.
I can imagine, yes. Well, let's talk about a little bit about some of these traditions that you live on a farm, right?
Yes.
With it's so cute. You have a goat, you have I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. And you and your husband live on this farm, and the 12 days of Christmas years ago have taken new shape for you all.
Yes. Yes.
So I thought that was so neat. Tell us a little bit about your tradition with the 12 days of Christmas.
Yeah. So we realized years ago that if we wanted to establish kind of that culture in our own home, we were going to have to go against the flow because the society that we live in is very much on to the next thing. Like Christmas is over at midnight on the 25th, and everyone's on to the next thing. And I just, I just sensed that there was more. But it was something that we would have to be very intentional about, and that we would have to clear space for, and we would have to stand still a little bit while, the current of life is moving along. And so we do have a number of, I have a whole section in the book about Christmastide. And we do have a number of organic traditions that, things that we like to do during that time. It's not so hard and fast, like we do this on this day, but I have certain recipes that I save for the 12 days. We have certain activities. One of the things that I always love to do, I don't think I wrote about this in the book, but one of my favorite things during the 12 days is to invite some of my girlfriends over for a cup of tea and just to sing Christmas carols. And
Yes.
because, just singing a few every Sunday leading up to Christmas, that's not enough. There's so many great ones. It's just
Yes.
fun to be able to revisit some of our old favorites. But we typically, I don't do this every single year. I kind of put my finger on my own pulse, after Christmas and see
Mhm.
what my reserves look like. But most years we have a big 12th night party to celebrate the end of Christmas. If we don't have a big party, we might just have some friends over. We'll do something, something simple. But more often than not, we'll have a big 12th night party and invite people. Everybody brings food, and we just invite people over, and it's one last hurrah before it's all said and done. And the first year that we did that, we realized how delighted the children were because,
Yeah.
they were like, it's not over. We get something else to look forward to. And
And
I
is
mean,
this on Christmas? Sorry to interrupt, but is this on
no,
Christmas Day?
this is on the 12th day of Christmas. So this would be
Okay.
January the 5th.
Oh, the 12th.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So, so the Feast of Epiphany is on the 6th. And so
Yeah.
that is, entering really its own season. But again, historically, particularly in the English tradition, I think that there's been a kind of send off to the Christmas season on 12th
Mm.
night. And so, that it just always feels like a little delightful, cherry on top.
I love that. Not many people do that. That's not very common at all, I don't
No, it's
think.
not.
Right. Yeah, so I love that. I always think about the 12th day of Christmas. I was thinking of before Christmas until
Right,
it's
right,
over, but
right.
that's not. So tell me about even the song, the
Yeah, so
12 days of Christmas. So
it's Yeah, it
So,
starts on the 25th. So the
yes.
25th is the first day of Christmas.
Hmm.
And so I actually don't really know. I've read so many conflicting things about the origins of that song.
Hmm. Yeah.
Some people say that there's, really strong symbolism in each of the gifts, and some people say, oh no, it's just, kind of a fun um thing. I'm sure it's a blend of both.
Yes,
Um,
probably.
but it does acknowledge the fact that, the first day of Christmas is the 25th. And so that pretty much a week and a half,
Yeah.
after Christmas Day is when my husband and I really like to save a lot of our traditions so that we can spread it out and not feel like we have to pack everything in before the 25th because, it just gets so busy.
Yes, it
And
is.
there's just too much goodness. One thing that my mother really modeled for me was the power and the importance of anticipation and savoring, that we need both to just fully be present to our joys.
Mhm.
And observing the 12 days of Christmas is one of the ways that allows me to do that.
That is, I just love that idea that you instill in the book, and just the traditions that you invite people to start. If they don't have any,
Mhm.
and I will tell you, my family is when we don't have a lot of traditions at all for Christmas. And I love this because it just, although my kids are now grown, but still, there's time. I have grandchildren, and
Oh
there's time
yeah.
to start now too. So that's one. I said I will have. I don't have them yet, but I never.
Yes.
Well, I love that. Well, we know that a lot of people find this season joyful, but also very overwhelming, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
what are some of the ideas that you give in the book to reduce the stress and preserve the truly meaning of Christmas?
Mhm. Well, early in the book, I mean, I think even in the introduction, I talk about Christmas itself and the season as a resting place.
Mm.
And I know that that is so countercultural because it's the
It
busiest time
is.
of year for many people. But what I mean by that is just really a invitation to embark on this season from a place of rest, from a place of peace and sufficiency in Christ, and just that acceptance in the beloved, the knowledge that we don't have to do anything to earn God's favor, and that
That's right.
everything that we have in our hands we can offer to Him in love, and that He can translate that, into goodness and blessing in the lives of our people. And so, that's the first thing, just to accept the rest that God offers us, even in the midst of great activity. And another thing, personally, I have noticed when my heart starts to beat faster over my to-do list at Christmas, that is such a welcome warning sign to me that something is amiss, that I'm, you know, uh, oftentimes motivated by fear and hurry rather than love. And I think that so much of our culture is generated by fear. I
So
think
true.
that's really at the heart of a lot of our haste and our hurry and our even our comparison culture.
Mhm.
And so I think recognizing that for the enemy that it is, and choosing to step back into that rest, to let God put his wings over us, to spread his wings over us and to welcome us into a place of rest, is huge.
Yes.
Um, and also just recognizing the forces that may be contributing to that, whether it's social media or whether it's, other kinds of media, magazines, or, anything that's making us feel like we're behind or that we're not enough, to just really dial that back, if not just turn
Mm.
it off completely.
Yes. Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. And I always think about, I did a study one time on the word shalom.
Mm.
And the way that shalom is in Hebrew is like it's almost like a place, right? It's like it is not a feeling.
Yes.
It's a place of peace. And so it's a place that you have to deliberately choose to go to, right? And so this
Yes.
reminds me of that because it's very true. Our life is always going to demand that we go away from this place of
Yes.
peace, a place of of grace, of love, of the enduring love of God and Word of God that became flesh and dwell among
Mhm.
us, and the holiness of God displayed it. So we if we don't stop and deliberate say, okay, no, we're going to pause and we're going to make time and we're going to take our busy bodies and move our minds and our heart to this resting place.
Yes.
Now, I love that you call that a resting place. It's a perfect description of it. Love that. And I want to talk about a pair of stories in your book that you refer to both of them as a blessing in your book on how they were so opposite and yet
Mhm.
they brought you to the same place. One is that, on the year that your house was featured on the Southern Living
Mhm.
magazine. I want to see that. That's gorgeous. I can only imagine how gorgeous your home is with all the decorations that you mentioned. But and then on the same year, right, you had a fire and you ended up spending Christmas in a trailer, right?
Yeah. So those
And
were, yeah.
so
I'm
tell us
sorry.
no, that's okay. Tell us how do these two stories have in common, for this.
Yeah. So the visit from Southern Living was um very early in my marriage and my tenure here at this old farmhouse, which is very much a character in my book and in my story. The home where my husband and I live. Um, but and then about, gosh, it was 7 years ago now. We had a pretty catastrophic house fire. And by God's mercy, our house was not destroyed. It was greatly damaged, but we were able to. We had a rider on our insurance policy, which enabled us to have a basically like a FEMA camper, like an RV, in our
Wow.
backyard, and so that we could stay on site for the restoration and to care for all of our farm animals and everything. So that was a huge blessing. But that Christmas was very hard
I can
because
imagine.
all of the traditions that we built up over all these years, between the year that Southern Living came and the year that we're here, having Christmas in our backyard, um, it was such a contrast. And most of the things that I love to do and I wasn't able to do, just logistically.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I felt very homesick, even though I was in my backyard. I just was looking up at the promised land of my house, like longing to be there.
Yeah,
But what the Lord really showed me during that year is that everything that mattered back in my home that I love mattered in that camper, and that all of my ideals of homemaking and hospitality and beauty, that all of those serve the relationships in my life. And that's the constant. That's what matters. And I remember that year in particular, that latter year, um, one of our favorite Christmas traditions is to invite my husband's family and this other family that's like family, all their kids and grandkids, and they all come for a Christmas Eve brunch, and it's just our favorite thing. And it's very much all about kids. I have a lot of traditions that are surrounded around the children and a lot of, special desserts and different things that we do, games that we play. And that year when we were in the camper, that was what I missed the most. Like I just and we kind of joked about it, like, oh well, there's not room, it's 40 something people, that there's not room in this little camper to everybody.
yeah.
But the day after Christmas, one of my friends who always comes to this brunch called me and said, Lanier, I don't we don't want to impose, but the kids really want to come to your house. Like, they were so sad not to come to the brunch, and can we just come? Can we let them, play in the yard? I was shocked and delighted. And of course I said yes. And I ran to the grocery store. And of course, this was December the 26th. So
Oh,
all
wow.
the Christmas cookies were gone. There-
Yeah,
And so I bought like some little butter cookies and some apple cider and brought that back home. And it was such a fun day. Like the kids all came, they all played in the barn, they played in the yard, a lot of the same games and different things. And I realized, everything that mattered was right there in that backyard,
that's right. That's right.
and the kids didn't care that we didn't have all the trappings and the to-dos. They were just, all of that was a container for our relationships. And so, yeah, that was the real gift of, that year bookended with that early year when we just had started to establish a lot of our own traditions. So,
I love that. And the other thing that's so cool is because so many people out there, they equate this time with a hard time because they cannot afford a lot of things for their
yes,
kids,
yes,
right? And so your experience with this just highlights the fact that all we need is the Lord and the people we love,
and each
right?
other. Yes,
And
absolutely.
sometimes the love, the people will the Lord, the people we love, and the memories of the people who we loved and are no longer with us,
Yes,
and the joy that we can instead of highlighting their absence, but just rejoicing in what they meant for our lives, right?
yes, yes.
So that is very meaningful because indeed there are people who right now they are just like stressed and sad and depressed because, and we've been there as a
Mhm.
family, out of jobs. We're how are we going to provide for our kids and give a Christmas? But what you find out at the end is that, as you said, what's most important was there anyway.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
I love that.
And that sorrow is not the enemy of joy, that it really does clear space for joy to grow.
Yes, yes. Well, some of the essays, some of the excerpts of your book, they talk about your struggle with infertility and how Christmas made the feelings really louder, right, for
Mhm.
you at times. So how what would you say to a woman out there who is perhaps struggling with infertility or something like that, and how what the Lord has showed you through
Mhm.
these traditions and the lessons that you have learned and that you share in this book?
Well, I would say first off that, and this goes without saying for any sorrow or disappointment, that, and you've already alluded to this, Patricia, that this time of year really does foreground um, the losses or disappointments in life. And it's very, very important to name that to the Lord. It's easy to complain about him rather than to him. And I would say it is really crucial that we remember to just bring those griefs to him and keep our hearts open to him,
Absolutely.
because our capacity for joy is directly related to our willingness to walk through sorrow with him. And so that is really crucially important to just really keep our hearts open, not to close our hearts to the wounds and disappointments of life, because that is where the Lord meets us. He is near the brokenhearted. And the reality is he does not spare us from the heartaches of this world, but he does carry us. He does give us of himself and treasures that could not come to us any other way.
That's right.
So
100%.
nothing is more important than that.
No,
Anything
no.
that keeps us pinned to his feet is precious to us.
Oh, it's so good to hear from someone that, that sees that, because we are at an age that like we want to people want things fixed fast. We have such a prosperity gospel going around where you come to Jesus and you're saved. No, he's a man of sorrows. That's what
Mhm.
the Bible calls him. He
Yes.
was pierced for our our transgressions. I mean, it is, he knows sorrow. He says in this world you will have troubles, but I have overcome the world. And he invites us to do that in him and through him and with him, right? So I love it that you invite people to look at the sorrows that they go through in this season and understanding that Emmanuel, Jesus, is with us,
Yes.
and that he is very aware of your sorrow, that he wants to comfort you and bring you joy, the joy of his presence. I
Yes.
love that. Well, I want to say something about this book, y'all. You have to really get it. First of all, they it has the most beautiful illustrations and the most beautiful poetry and some super yummy recipes. I was actually, it's funny because tonight I have a gathering at my church and we're doing cookie swap.
Oh, fun.
And I haven't baked my cookies yet. And I was looking at your cookie recipes. I was like, let me see if I can do one of her recipes. So she has all kinds of beautiful, but you have a beautiful story of friendship with the lady who is responsible for the beautiful illustrations.
Yes, I
So
do.
tell me a little bit about her and how this um, partnership happened.
Yeah. So Jennifer Trafton and I, Jennifer is the illustrator. We have been friends for well over a decade. She is not only a incredibly gifted artist, she is an accomplished and successful author. She's written a number of middle grade books, and she's just a dear friend of mine. We've been writing partners for, I know, isn't it gorgeous? We've been writing
Absolutely
partners
breathtaking.
for years, and just swapping our work, sharing our work. And she came to visit me Christmas of 2020, and we were sitting around my kitchen table. And Christmas of 2020 was the weirdest and loneliest Christmas that hopefully any of us will know globally.
Yes,
That was
it
really,
was
really hard.
sad. Mhm.
But we were sitting at my kitchen table, and she was just kind of watching me, go through my little traditions and making different, cookies and candies and things that I was going to mail to people. And, even though we weren't having the large scale Christmas that we, were used to having, there were a lot of the things that I was still doing. And she was just kind of, prodding me like, what's the why behind all this wherefore, and we had so
Mhm,
many fun conversations about why it matters, to really just articulate what we believe by what we do,
mhm,
and just really turn the intention of our hearts through the work of our hands, and just offering up the raw materials of our lives in response to an incarnational love. And we had so many fun conversations about that over the days of her visit. And on the last morning I said, Jennifer, I just had a wonderful idea. Said, hey, if I write this book that's been percolating all these years, would you? And I didn't even get the question out of my mouth. She was like, absolutely, I will illustrate. Yes. And it
Oh,
just turned out being to be such a fun collaboration because she
mhm,
knows me so well. She knows my
yes.
story, and she was really able to help me bring to the surface the the themes that were most important,
Mhm,
and just
mhm,
kind of help me shape the story arc and help me even see the story arc, which was really, it was really, really special. So her illustrations come from a place of just really knowing me as a friend, spending a lot of time in my home. Like there's so many little Easter eggs throughout the book of like my favorite teapot or one of my
yeah.
goats or my brother's teddy bear from his childhood or, just various things. And so
So
it's very,
beautiful.
very personal.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book. Just a beautiful, beautiful. It's like I mean, it's a kitchen, kitchen, living room,
Yes.
dining room book, and you can put it on your coffee table because it's so beautiful. But I do have to ask this because I have, I would say 80% of my listeners are female,
Mhm.
and I need to ask you about your recipes then because they want to
Okay.
know. They want to know about your recipes. How did they come about? Why are they what are they going to expect here as far as recipes?
Yeah.
Not just cookies. So
Not
tell us.
just cookies. No, not just cookies. So, it's been so fun for me this year to make all my Christmas recipes from my own book, because I've just had this ragtag folder where I've just scribbled things down and, used for years, and it
Yeah,
was just a disorganized mess.
I
But
have them.
every every
I
single
have one.
recipe in this book is from love and long affection. Some of them are my mother's, some are ones that my husband and I have enjoyed over the years that I've cultivated and tweaked. And I've got my mother-in-law's famous coconut cake in there. I've got my mother's, I call it the sacrosanct Christmas morning casserole because she would not give the recipe to anybody, even me. And now I put it in a book. I don't think
You,
she would mind. But so each section of the book, so there are 4 sections for the weeks of Advent and then a section for Christmastide, and each section has a menu page and like a meal. Well, the Christmas cookies is a menu of cookies, so that's not really a
yes,
meal, but yeah, they're all just really vetted recipes that I have used for many, many years. And it was really fun, as we were finishing the book, my publisher set up a very heartwarming and elaborate recipe testing scheme where we had volunteers from all over the country, for all levels of prowess in the kitchen, from chefs, professional chefs, to people who, you know, rarely cooked, if at all.
wow.
And so that was really, really fun to get people's feedback. And make the recipes as friendly and as accessible as I possibly could. So
I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, some of them I'm looking forward to dabble on them in the kitchen. My daughter, my youngest daughter, she's the baker in the family.
uh,
I'm not much of a baker, but I think I'm gonna try some of these
oh,
things. Well, we're getting to the end of our show, and I really appreciate you coming. It was such a pleasure to get to talk to you
oh,
and
likewise.
to learn more about you and about this glad and golden hours, this beautiful treasure. Tell us, just to the women and the men who are listening to this, what are your hopes, for the readers as they experience this book?
So my dearest hope is that this book would just be a friend to its readers. That it would be like an arm around the shoulder that says, hey, look, I know this is a complicated season, but it's also a very beautiful season. And here are some stories about how God's met me that I hope would resonate on a more universal, in a more universal way. But also, um, the subtitle is a companion for Advent and Christmastide. And I really mean that in the neighborliest sense. Like, I really want it to be not a guide or a manual or a glorified to-do list, but a friend. And if people want to read it like a story, that's great. If they want to take some of the suggestions and maybe incorporate one or two or however many, like, that's great too. But first and foremost, I want it to be a friend. So,
Oh, I love it. I love Lanier. Well, I have to tell you that originally, when I was going to only feature your book in our conversation in our my podcast, but I'm so impressed with it that I will feature in my column for the Atlanta Journal Constitution this
oh,
weekend. So
lovely.
yes,
Thank you,
this
Patricia.
is going to be for, yeah, this weekend. So it's going to be there and reach, a big audience there. So
Lovely.
for those who are listening, of course, go to the link and you're going to be able to read my column about it as well. And you have all of the links to connect with Lanier to purchase the book. And also, if she is giving us a copy of Glad and Golden Hours to give to someone in my audience, all you have to do is put your information on that link that is on my show notes, and we will mail this to you fast so you can get it and be able to enjoy a little bit of it before Christmas. And on the 12 days after Christmas
That's
too.
right.
So what a pleasure to talk to you, and it was really a blessing. I pray that you have a wonderful and Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Patricia. Same to you and your audience. So.
Thank you.